In my first video of how I got here, I began my passage of documenting the start of my new homestead in Vermont and how I wound up going down this road. It was my first real deep dive into the world of cinematography and my use of DaVinci Resolve. I also left out the explanations and allowed the lyrics of the music to emotionally portray the story. Now I hope to tell the story with the likenesses of those who influenced or altered my path. George Lucas once said, "Special effects is by itself quite boring, but it's a great tool for telling a story." And my story is based on the most accurate events as I remember them. Creating this video was technically a challenge, but it was also an emotional catharsis for my soul to reflect on who I was, who I am, and my true family. An acknowledgement to those who helped me and to those who hurt me. I have been off the radar for many years, and many folks might wonder where I faded away to. I owe these folks an explanation. But I also wish to portray the major legal issues that wound up hurting me, to allow others facing similar issues in life to learn from my mistakes. Hollywood often portrays family as this idealistic fantasy of romantic loyalty and love. What I have learned is that family is about love, loyalty, and presence. The only people who count in your life are the ones that show up when things get hard, and hold your hand when you're hurting, and listen to you spew tears about nothing at all while they hold a paper towel for your snotty nose. Blood might make you kin, but love and trust makes you family. Thank you, Nina Gupta, for putting my feelings into words. Time is a thief, and life lessons abound with loss. The older you get, the more your loved ones become memories in the dark chasms of your own mind. In time, we all take inventory of who is left, but you also reflect on the spirit world. My family was a combination of many cultures, and we held many special spiritual beliefs. My being was forged in the embers of the Second World War and my family's creation of Glory Ranch. It wasn't a mere house, it was the roots of my family, my ethos. And this house was a home protected by the Fae, or we folk. I often had what can be called telepathic conversations with the we folk. Colorful and animated exchanges would be a better description. Every family has a black sheep. That one person who abandons the family and its deeply held roots in exchange for something else. What else? I cannot answer that, for I never had that desire. My brother did. He never really fit in, and he hit the road as soon as high school paroled him. Life has many paths that must be traversed. One of them is finding your soulmate. That one person who slides into your vacant spaces and makes you whole. But modern life has many obstacles, and this was one of them. Stacy came to me at a time when I was seeking direction in life. Mama had recently died, my brother never talked to me, and the obligation of Glory Ranch was a true millstone about my neck. I truly believed that she was a gift from God, but my crazy German short-haired pointer, Marley, had different ideas. I will never ignore my dog's opinion ever again. The day finally came that this drama imploded. It would become one of the most complicated and poorly litigated court cases on record. A true mixture of salad greens from several legal venues, all blended into a sour green smoothie from hell. A realization that your family is dead and I am waiting for God. This is the true story of the final days of Glory Ranch. Mama, I have to say I am so proud of having such a dynamic and beautiful mother. I see you're now in England with your cute doggie. Can you tell us about our family in Germany and the Second World War?
I grew up as a little girl in a big family. There were 8 children, and Papa was a forestier. I think you call that a game warden in America. Mecklenburg was a quiet and beautiful place to grow up. I had 2 brothers and 5 sisters. We would walk to school each day, and I would pass by a grandmother who sat on her porch in a rocking chair. She would often bake sweets like Bienenstich, a flat cake with almonds and honey. One day I remember walking home during the war, and the Russians had cut off the grandmother's head and left her body sitting in her rocking chair on the porch. When I got home, the Russian soldiers were in our house. They had never seen a toilet before and asked Papa what it was. He told them it was a potato washer. They were so mad when the potatoes disappeared.
Mama, that is so funny and sad about the potatoes. I never forgot these stories. Let me switch the camera angle out. I want the world to see you in your glory.
I was always giving them my opinion, and I didn't have a professional job after the war, so the communists kicked me out of what was then East Germany. My sister's husband, Karl-Heinz, worked as an engineer for the gas company. They made gas out of coal. Heinze built an alcohol still on a 3-wheeled bicycle, and he would go to the cherry fields. He and a few farmers would steal cherries from the communist factory orchards and make kirsch. He used this to trade for food on the black market. East German marks were toilet paper. Hilda's husband built an oil press in the basement and made rapeseed oil. They also used it to trade for food on the black market. One day, Hilda put too many oilseed cakes in the wood stove, and it blew up.
You remember when Karl-Heinz taught me how to build a still? You and Papa came home from a party one night to find me standing on a stool in front of the stove with a homemade still. I was wearing those lederhosen Bavarian shorts.
Yes, your father was so mad and wanted to know how you learned this. But he didn't want to punish you because he was proud of you, figuring out how to do this.
What about Uncle Herbert and Aunt Waltraud? Didn't Herbert serve on U-boats? And Uncle Eric was listed as MIA in the Ukraine.
Waltraud was lucky. She and her husband were in Kiev, and they got a small apartment after the war. Herbert got into selling insurance after he spent his time serving on U-boats in the Kriegsmarine. Dresden was Totelrube. Köln was almost as bad, and only the church was left. I remember the American planes flying into Berlin, and the commies were building walls. Papa was doing what he could to survive, and Mutti couldn't get over Erich dying in the Ukraine. Erika was so beautiful, and she always dreamed of going to Hollywood to make films. But Erika got very sick, and there were no hospitals and medicine, and she died so young. Erika was my older sister, and she and I often talked about America. It sounded like the land of milk and honey.
I know. I had a chance to live in Dresden for a bit, you remember? To this day, I prefer not to talk about why I was there. But I remember passing through the border at Erfurt. I lived in an old house and remember the ancient cherry tree outside by my upper floor bedroom. The shower was a pit dug in the floor plumed with plastic garden hose. We didn't have any hot water. The trabbies would fire up at 5 a.m., and the whole neighborhood sounded like chainsaws with lots of blue smoke. Those were the commie cars leaving for work. But I remember going to concerts in front of the Bear Cage, sponsored by BMW. We sat on blankets on the cobblestone streets, drank lots of wheat beer, and listen to classical music.
I couldn't believe you took that opportunity. East Germany during the occupation was a horrible place. Papa was struggling after the war and raised pigs and hunting dogs after the war. Before the commies built the walls to keep people in, I would sneak back and forth to visit my father and mother. One time, I put a bunch of baby pigs in my knapsack. I was so scared that they would cry when I went over the border. I would sneak in a river and float over, and the piggies might cry loudly. So I gave them sleeping pills. They all went to sleep and were snoring when I swam over the border. I snuck many baby turkeys into East Germany. You could buy a lot of food and things on the black market with turkeys. A baby turkey was pure gold in those days.
Well, how did you get to America? Wind up in Chicago?
I talked to an American army officer about going to America. He told me I needed to find a sponsor, and I had to speak English and pass an investigation. He helped with the paperwork, but my English was horrible. So many were trying to go to America, and my chance to go was cancelled. I cried for so long. I asked God why I had to suffer so much. But then I got a chance to work as a nanny for a wealthy family in England, and they would sponsor me. I worked all day for this family and took English classes at night. The gentleman I worked for helped me with English too. It was always my idea to go to America. So I talked to the family I was working for and told them I wanted to go America. They understood. So I applied again, but I need a sponsor. Sonny and his wife in Milwaukee offered to sponsor me, and paperwork was accepted. I packed my things in a green leather suitcase and got on the airplane for America. I cried tears the whole way. It was a feeling of joy and sadness. The English family had been so good to me, and I was going to a place where I knew no one. Sonny worked in machine shop, and his wife worked in some kind of beer brewing job. I went to work doing odd jobs, and a year later, I was able to move to Chicago, where I met your papa.
How did you and Papa meet and decide to get married?
Oh, no one has ever asked me that in this country. I went to Chicago to work as a housekeeper. Your father was so impressed with me and gave me the job. Your papa had just lost his first wife, Mina. He was lonely, and we quickly got to know each other and started seeing each other. He worked hard in his business and talked about retiring. Your grandfather often stayed at a small house in Estes Park because he was a mountain climber. But he was also a mathematics professor. I was shocked when he proposed to me, and I loved him, even if we were a few years apart. I felt that God had finally answered my prayers for a new life. He wanted to retire and move to Estes Park. I had never heard of Estes Park, but it was my duty to go with him and support him as his wife.
Mama, that is an odd story. That is what happened to me. Remember how hard my life was when you died? Boli never talked to me. I tried to talk to him and sent him emails, but he never answered any of them. I was so alone. I felt that Stacy was a gift from God, but she was sent by Satan.
I know, and I am so sad. She was so beautiful, and I could see her. She did so many things right, but I could see the evil side of her. It worried me, and I was so sad and angry when things didn't work out. What made me so angry was how your brother treated you. Can you understand how mad I am at your brother? We didn't raise you kids like that.
Waldtraut was like having a second mother growing up. She eventually bought a house, and we planted lots of trees on this property. How did Waldtraut decide to follow you to America?
Waldtraut's husband died from a massive heart attack I don't really remember, but it was around 1965. We had gotten the barn built and had horses at the time. Your father and I felt that it would be a good idea to have your aunt spend a few months with us. Do you remember all of us driving down to Denver to pick her up? The snow was so bad that her flight was delayed for hours. We spent the night at the Brown Palace Hotel and then picked Waldtraut up the next day. But she never went back to Germany. The commies stole our house in East Germany after my father and mother died. So Waldtraut was happier to stay with us in America.
What did you think when the Cuban Missile Crisis happened? I remember that as a kid. It was a nerve-wracking time for us.
By that time, my life had changed so much. I was now an American citizen, and I had a loving family. I didn't understand much of what happened, but I had my memories of the Russians and what they did to us. I was so afraid. I remember buying up all the sugar, flour, and laundry soap at Brody's Market. Your papa was so mad, but accepting of me. He reassured me that this was America, and what happened years ago would never happen again. And he was right, but we always packed together a care package for the family left in East Germany. The US government gave your papa a tax break for sending goodies into East Germany. So I would send a care package about once a month. It wasn't much. Cookies, chocolate, and things you couldn't find in East Germany. But I used a razor blade to carefully cut open some of the cookie packages and slip a couple of $100 bills in there. The bulls often opened the packages and inspected them, but they never found the money.
What did you think when Papa built Glory Ranch? Henry and 17 others worked over a year to build it. I knew as a kid that this home was protected by the wee folk.
I was overwhelmed. I felt that the wee folk of the forest worked with God to answer a prayer. You could feel the wee folk dancing for joy. Even the troll-looking ones were happy. Your papa and I wanted a place where the family could finally rest and be happy. A place that would take care of the family even in bad times. And I could grow all sorts of flowers, and the garden was a joy. Your papa loved the snow peas and kohlrabi.
I remember Papa loved those. We enjoyed many good years, but I remember the day we drove Papa to the hospital. It was supposed to be routine, but you and I had to work so hard to try to save Papa, and in the end, we failed. Do you remember those dark days?
Yes, it was a terrifying moment. I didn't know what to do, and I depended so much on you for help. You understood the medical stuff. Diane, Bill, and Waldtraut were there with you and me. You drove me to Denver to see another doctor. But the image still sits in my head when we walked into the Boulder Hospital and Papa's door was closed. It was never closed. The look on Diane's, Bill's, and Waltraud's face was all I needed to see. I hugged you crying, and I said, "Now we need to be strong. We will get through this."
I will not forget that dark day. I tried to call Boley and no answer, so I drove to his place. He was mad at me for stalking him and said, "What do you want?" In disbelief, I just said, "Nothing. I just want to tell you your father died." I drove back to pick you up and we drove home. Words weren't necessary. I could feel the quiet tears of the wee folk looking over our shoulders.
I knew then that we're now a man. All I felt was grief and anger. Your brother should have been nicer to you, and he should have been there for the family. You looked after your family. When Waltraud got really sick, you were always there. You would visit her after work before coming home, and you were her only soul to see her through the passage. I was already beginning to get really sick myself. Waltraud and I could depend on you to help us.
I know. I recall the day that the hospital called me about Waltraud. They had asked permission to give her morphine. I raced over to her room and she was still alive. I lovingly grasped her hand and said, "We love you, Waltraud, and I am here." She opened her eyes and looked at me. Her eyes were crystal clear and open. I said, "We will meet again in heaven. And don't worry, Chatty will be taken care of." Chatty was her Springer Spaniel dog. My dog Dodie was younger, but he looked after Chatty like a true friend.
I am so grateful that you were there for her last breath. It was so sweet when you told me that. She then closed her eyes and you heard her take her last breath. I cried so hard and felt so bad you had to go through that. I was worried. My own health was leaving me and you took such good care of me. And I was so proud of you working for those computer companies.
I worked for a number of computer companies and instrument companies. You remember when I got the patent for flow meters? Working for storage tech was a blessing. It allowed me to work at a good job and take care of my family and its home. We were so worried when storage tech went bankrupt. Worse yet, your health was failing and Colorado assigned me as your critical care provider. You and Papa brought me up well, so it was never a question.
I was so worried when I got really sick. But you took care of me for so many years, and our life was very hard during those years. But you tried so hard with your dog Dodie to make things good. We never missed a Christmas or a birthday or Thanksgiving. And you raised that wild baby rabbit who lived in the cage in my room. I loved that little bunny, and Dodie would sleep next to the bunny. It was so cute watching the two live as friends. But we also talked about many things. One of them was how to keep Glory Ranch, especially once I was gone. I knew deep down in my soul that you and your brother would not get along. It made me sad.
I could sense the issue. My Wadkin table saw was dropped off at Boley's house, and I wanted to drive out there to recover it. But you were so adamant that I not do it. You said that you were worried that there would be serious fights. A mother always knows.
The worst thing was our lawyer. Kaufman wasn't a good lawyer, but we lived in a small mountain town, so finding a good lawyer was hard. You tried to get Kaufman to come out to Glory Ranch to get my things in order. He refused many times and told us that I needed to come to his office. But I was bedridden for a few years at the end and couldn't do that. I wanted to be sure you would be okay after I was gone. I really thought that I should give you the house somehow, if you agreed to let Bowley use it if he need to. After all, you took care of me for so many years. Years you could have worked. And this is what your father and I wanted. A family homestead.
Kaufman was a horrible lawyer, and I ultimately had to fire him for incompetence. He caused a lot of problems, and my brother took advantage of these. I called Bowley when your doctor told me that they had done everything they could and that you were going to pass away. This time, he did answer my call, and he flew out to Colorado. It was a very awkward time. I had brought many of my dahlia flowers for your room and gave the nurses a bunch of them. You loved those flowers and taught me how to grow them.
Yes, I remember that. Thank you so much. You made my last few hours so peaceful. But I struggled with my affairs not being in order. But I saw the light of the passage, and there was nothing more I could do.
Bowley and I sat on a bench that evening, maybe 5 minutes. I don't remember what we talked about, if we even talked. But when we went back to your room, we found that you had peacefully passed away. It was about 6 p.m. on August 31st.
I recall seeing the light and being called over. But no, I left this world in loving peace. I worried about the wee folk getting upset, but I had faith in you that would take care of our family legacy. And I was glad to see you and Bowley working things out as brothers.
That was a very sad day for me. The wee folk were grieving, and I could feel their hands on my shoulder. Bowley immediately demanded I retain an attorney and demanded to see the will. I told him you didn't have one. He acted like the big shot in charge and demanded I retain Kaufman. He then flew back to Virginia. He didn't even want to see Glory Ranch. We would have a couple of calls together, and he agreed to establish me as the executor of the estate. But he refused to accept his responsibilities and refused to answer my calls regarding Glory Ranch. It was a very stressful time in my life.
I understand, and I am not happy with what happened. But now you need to be strong. You need to make your own new life, as I had too. Go to Vermont and build a new homestead. Remember, I will always be with you on your new journey.
Thank you, Mama. I would also like to thank everyone who has taken the time to be with me. Part 1 of this video introduced my mother. She was an incredible person. My channel is about my homestead and my machine tool world, but to get there from here requires me to introduce my journey. And sometimes that includes the hardest part of this journey. A special thanks to Hey Jen and Da Vinci Resolve for allowing me to have one last conversation with her. I would also like to thank those who subscribe and support my channel. Stay tuned for more to come.